the true foundation of America. During the Dark Ages in Europe, oppressive religions and systems of control dominated the people, leading countless souls astray and locking them in spiritual bondage. However, redemption could not come by dismantling these vast spiritual kingdoms. Instead, mortals were inspired to establish a new foothold on the Western continent, the Americas, to create an earthly foundation free from the entrenched dominion of false gods. Among them was Christopher Columbus, a mortal from Genoa. With divine guidance, Columbus gathered a crew and set sail westward, seeking the unknown world. His eventual discovery of the Americas marked a monumental moment for humanity, though Columbus himself remained unaware of the higher forces guiding him. As Columbus's achievements paved the way for migration to the Americas, false gods inspired mortals under their control to embark on their own voyages to the newly discovered lands in South America. Once there, the regions they controlled descended into violence, idolatry, and spiritual decay. Amid this turmoil, the higher realms worked tirelessly to inspire progress among mortals. They inspired advancements such as the telescope and the printing press, fostering an age of learning and scientific discovery. Groups of mortals in Western Europe were inspired to seek freedom of worship, leading to migrations to North America. Among these settlers were the Pilgrims, who landed at Plymouth Rock, dedicating their journey to the Creator, the universal Great Spirit, and the pursuit of liberty. The higher realms continued to inspire other groups, such as the Quakers, who were covenanted to live in peace and never engage in violence. These communities became beacons of virtue and wisdom, shaping the moral foundation of America. The contrast between South America and North America became evident over time. While the former was marked by violence and oppression, the latter saw the gradual rise of peace, knowledge, and righteousness. At this time, the higher realms outlined two critical objectives: to protect the Confucians in China, who had long been a bastion of spiritual wisdom, and to establish America as a nation free from the dominion of the false gods. For 300 years previously, higher realms had been subtly guiding the development of humanity in America. Through careful planning and inspiration, they nurtured a generation of enlightened leaders, raising 1,200 individuals to spiritual grades of exceptional wisdom and virtue. Among these leaders were Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Charles Carroll, John Hancock, and George Washington. These men, guided by the higher light, were chosen to lead the mortal revolution that would lay the foundation for a nation devoted to liberty, equality, and spiritual truth. Thomas Paine, inspired by the higher realms, became the voice of revolutionary doctrine. He proclaimed that all men have a natural right to worship the Creator in their own way, free from the tyranny of kings and the corruption of sacred texts. Paine denounced the doctrine of salvation through another's sacrifice as unjust, and declared that the so-called sacred books were the flawed works of men used to perpetuate war, oppression, and ignorance. Instead, he called for an age of reason, where individuals would seek truth and enlightenment through their own judgment. His doctrines, printed and distributed widely, resonated deeply with the colonists, fell into the hands of such men and women as had been previously spiritually prepared to receive them, and these people applauded the new doctrines to such an extent that the colonies repudiated the divine right of kings to govern without the consent of the governed. The American Revolutionary War that ensued was fought not only on the battlefields of earth but also in the spiritual realms. For 7 years, the higher realms worked tirelessly to protect and inspire the mortal revolutionaries. George Washington, the earthly commander, was under constant divine protection. They guarded him day and night, shielding him from harm and even deflecting bullets that were aimed at him. Similarly, other leaders and soldiers received guidance and protection, allowing them to endure the hardships of war and achieve victory. Through divine guidance and human resolve, the revolution succeeded. establishing a republic founded on principles of liberty, equality, and freedom. This triumph marked a significant step in the plan to redeem heaven and earth, demonstrating the power of unity, wisdom, and unwavering faith in the face of adversity. It set the stage for a new era of freedom, where humanity could strive to achieve its potential under the guidance of the higher light. For 3 centuries leading up to these events, the false gods of Earth's lower heavens had waged wars both in spirit and in mortal realms. In China, the Confucians made great strides, challenging the false god Brahma, whose followers, pushed out of China, spread into India and Persia. The false Buddha Cabal also sought dominion, engaging in bloody conflicts with Brahma's followers in India. However, neither of these false deities could rival the cunning and ambition of Thoth, also known as Gabriel, who claimed vast territories in both earth and heaven, challenging his rivals. Meanwhile, the Lumen, the false Christ, exploited mortal emissaries, including the British East India Company, to invade India under the guise of spreading peace and righteousness. Lumen inspired these emissaries to deceive the local populations, destroy their aqueducts, and enslave them. Over 7 million men, women, and children were killed in India. 30 million more perished from famine caused by destroyed irrigation systems. Lumen extended his ambitions to China, enforcing the opium trade to weaken the populace. His emissaries intoxicated the people, turning them into easy targets for exploitation. Yet the Confucians resisted, preventing him from fully conquering the region. Similarly, Lumen orchestrated the destruction of Native American tribes in North America, sending legions of angelic warriors to incite mortal violence that led to the deaths of 3 million Algonquin Indians. Despite their earthly victories, the false gods gained little in the heavens. Their kingdoms became plagued with unrest as deceived spirits turned against them, demanding retribution. In the year 1848, the great Orion chiefs from the emancipated heavens arrived with millions of disciplined angels. They descended to the lower heavens, cutting off the supplies that sustained the false gods' dominions, thus breaking the connections that bound false gods to their followers. This action mirrored a mortal general's siege of a wicked city. The lower heavens were in turmoil, collapsing under the weight of their corruption and the ambitions of the false gods who reigned over them. These self-proclaimed deities, who had once commanded vast dominions and countless followers among mortals and spirits alike, now faced rebellion and fragmentation. Many of their officers, once loyal, had grown disillusioned with their masters' deceitful ways and had broken away to form their own petty kingdoms. These mortal sects, divided by doctrine and enmity, were the physical manifestations of the chaotic heavenly domains. They were often tethered to physical locations on earth, such as churches and temples, where mortals gathered to worship. The preachers within these churches fell under the inspiration of these itinerant gods and their gangs of wandering spirits. These inspirations were carried to such an extent that the mortals of each sect were hostile to one another. An enmity existed between Protestants and Catholics, and between Protestants themselves, and between all of these and the Jews. This strife was not limited to the physical world but extended into the afterlife. When mortals of these sects passed away, their spirits were drawn into the corresponding heavens, the Methodist heaven, the Baptist heaven, the Presbyterian heaven, where they continued to serve the false god who had deceived them. Many of these spirits, longing for true salvation, cried out to see Christ, only to be shown the false god of their sect. Deceived, they believed they had found their Savior, for the binding of beliefs on earth extended to the heavens. Among these false gods was who called Paved, who was notable for his cunning and ambition. Declaring himself the true Christ, he established the Mormon sect on earth and a corresponding heavenly kingdom for his followers. He taught that faithful Mormons would one day rule over planets and their accompanying heavens. This promise of eternal dominion appealed to his followers' ambitions. but served only to expand Piad's own power. He discouraged exploration of higher spiritual truths, keeping the spirits of his followers bound to his domain. On Earth, Piad would promote polygamy, claiming that a man's heavenly kingdom would grow in proportion to the number of his mortal progeny. This doctrine, while cloaked in spiritual language, was a calculated strategy to increase the population under his influence. Longinus, another false god, created the Shaker heaven, presenting himself as the true Christ and demanding strict discipline from his mortal followers. Their austere earthly lives reflected the rigid bondage of their spirits in his realm. Similarly, Seawan, a false god of cunning persuasion, established the all-highest heaven. This false deity took the mortal Swedenborg on a journey through various spiritual realms, showing him distorted visions of lower heavens and hells. Seawan attributed these realms to other religions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, while proclaiming his own heaven as the ultimate truth. Deceived by these visions, Swedenborg spread Seawan's teachings among mortals, leading countless souls into his fabricated heaven after death. As the number of false gods grew, their realms multiplied and fragmented further, resulting in thousands of petty kingdoms in the lower heavens. These oppressive domains, filled with darkness and strife, reflected the chaotic ambitions of their rulers. The false gods, whether in Asia, Europe, or the Americas, rejected the Creator's true light, instead claiming sole divinity. Each false god declared themselves to be the one true God or Christ, demanding worship and loyalty. And mortal sects that followed them did the same thing. The Presbyterian professed the true Christ, but denounced all others as false. The Methodist professed the true Christ, but denounced all others as false. The Mormon professed the true Christ, but denounced all others. The Roman Catholics also professed the true Christ, but denounced all others as false. And so it happened, as had been prophesied of old, lo, Christ here, Christ there. As a testimony to these writings, in the time when the spiritual connections between the false gods to their followers were cut, the acrimony existing between different sects began to suddenly die out, and they became more friendly to one another. The higher realms, observing the misery spreading across the lower heavens and the mortal world, resolved to intervene. Their attention turned to America, where millions of enslaved Negro people lived in bondage. This injustice, both physical and spiritual, could not be ignored, and they sought to address the suffering of the enslaved. They identified Xerxes, the great Persian king now residing in the lower heavens, as a spirit of sufficient wisdom and strength to lead the effort. They also summoned Leonidas, a noble Greek angel, and tasked them both with liberating the slaves and their oppressors alike. These divine forces descended to earth, prepared to inspire mortals to embrace freedom and justice. However, they realized that true righteousness could not be imposed by force. Mortals had to choose it willingly. To this end, they withdrew the guardian angels that hold guard over mortals and prevent low spirits and thoughts from influencing them. Thus, mortals would experience the consequences of their own actions. Straightway, a war ensued between the owners of the slaves and the neighboring states. There rose up 2 million men in arms, pushing on in war on every side, coursing the rich soil in mortal blood. Xerxes came to New York and took away the guardian angels, those of holiness, and he left the city in the hand of low spirits. And at once, the city was plunged in riots, and the people were as a mad people, wild and fearful. Yet, the fighting continued. Neither side had defined its principles or taken stand for righteousness' sake. But the war went on, and the destruction was fearful, laying in death many thousands in a single battle. The Persian and Greek angels went down to these mortals, and by inspiration and by dreams and by visions said to them, "Whoever prefers riches and earthly things shall battle in vain, but whoever prefers righteousness shall win." And millions of angels descended and tried to persuade them, but mortals would not hear. Even the chief general on Liberty's side closed his soul against them. He enforced slavery himself with his mighty army. And years went on, and all the people began to perceive that without righteousness there would be no end to the war. Then Xerxes and Leonidas went forward with their inspiring hosts, to overspread the north and to inspire mortals to a more heavenly stand, to make them see justice and liberty. And for 100 days these angels dwelt with mortals, but many mortals were too gross in the earth to comprehend. The angels continued to overrun the land, inspiring mortals day and night to demand freedom for the slaves. Now, when they numbered the mortals and graded them, they discovered the majority had turned to freedom's side. They then went to the city of Washington, to Lincoln, the president, who was not bound in doctrines. Xerxes told his inspiring angels that it shall come to pass that Lincoln will hear you, and he shall resolve in his own mind to freedom for the slaves. But he will seek for some external sign, fearing he may have mistaken the angels that minister to him. We will provide a way for this end also. And the angels went to Lincoln in a vision like a dream, and they said to him, Lincoln, Lincoln. And he answered and said, Who are you? And the angel said, Such as come in the Creator's name for freedom's sake. Behold, millions of his angels look down from heaven, and would come to your armies if you would but proclaim freedom to the slaves. The Creator's hand is in this matter. Lincoln awoke, and was troubled with his dream. The next night the angels came again and retold their words, and added thereto, The great majority of the country is ripe for this matter. You fear this is but a foolish dream. Behold, we will give you proof tomorrow. Lincoln awoke more troubled than before, but remembered the angels said, We will give you proof tomorrow. Now, at that time there lived in Washington a medium called Nettie Maynard, through whom spirits spoke whilst in entrancement. And on the day mentioned, the angels spoke through her to a man who was a friend of Lincoln, called Case. They said, Go and fetch the president into the presence of this woman. Case went to Lincoln and told him what was said. And when Lincoln went before the medium, the angels entranced her. They said, We told you that we would give you proof tomorrow. Now we repeat to you, the Creator is in this matter. Unless you proclaim the freedom of the slaves, you shall not succeed. Do this, and the enemy's armies shall melt away like snow in the sun. Lincoln's eyes were opened, and he went straight away and proclaimed freedom to the whole 4 million slaves. The slaves were free. Xerxes said to Leonidas, You, great conqueror, you shall conquer me again. Take your angels and go with the armies of the north and inspire them on to victory. Give them such strength and courage as they have not before manifested. And as for myself and my hosts, we will go to the armies of the south, and we will inspire them to believe they are conquered, and so make them flee before your soldiers. Thus these great angel warriors allotted themselves to the work. And lo and behold, the northern armies ran forth over the enemy's country as if war were but play, and the southern armies vanished, disarming and returning to their homes. The slaves were free. Xerxes declared, Let this be a testimony that America is the place where a new era has begun. In this era, there shall be no caste amongst the people. And the chosen of God shall be anyone of any race who chooses God. In this great land, freedom and spiritual progress does not belong to an exclusive people, but to all. And these shall become the best, most perfect of all peoples on the earth. And they shall not consider race or color, but health and nobility, as to the mortal part. And as to the spiritual part, to practice peace, love, wisdom, and good works. And one great universal spirit only. Unseen forces shape the life of every living thing. All of our learning, science, and religion are but stepping stones to lead us to harmony with God and with the universe. To acknowledge this is to keep open the road to hear His voice and receive His hand. Worlds without end. We hope that you found this video interesting and meaningful. To see other thought-provoking videos in the Secret History of Religion series, please visit our website at secretlifeofearth.com. Thank you.